Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Quantum Guide Show. And today I'm very happy to bring back Phil Warder. And for those of you who aren't familiar with him, let me tell you a little bit about him. Phil is the host and the producer of the Unexplained Incorporated podcast since 2020. The show started out primarily as a paranormal podcast, and it's evolved into the podcast where the unknown connects with the empowered. The show has expanded to cover all things based in the paradigm of the unexplained, spirituality, and the study of consciousness. The show revolves around conversations with guests in all of these fascinating walks of life. I've been guest on Phil's podcast twice now, and I've enjoyed our deep conversations very much. So go on over to his channel, subscribe, like, and check out his content. Since 2021, Phil has been honored to receive training and certification in core shamanism, Usui Reiki, and spiritually based hypnosis. He recently began a practice out of Lavender Lane Wellness Center in Waterloo, Ontario, Canada, where he accepts bookings for Reiki, spiritual hypnotherapy, and will soon be running drum circles there as well. Bookings can also be done remotely online, and the details are featured in the links section below. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the origins and modalities that go into what defines core shamanism, jumping timelines through sound healing and shamanic breath work, Phil's relationship to spirit animals, including doves and owls, and how he discovered his connection to the mantis beings. All of the links are featured below in the description. Please do check me out, subscribe to my channels, leave me a comment, like my videos, and share my content with your friends. And I'm happy to announce that channel memberships are now available, so you can help to support my channel and also take advantage of my perks. Without further ado, I'll bring on Phil. Phil, nice to see you again. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, Karen. And yes, over the last month or two, we've really taken the time to get to know each other. And it's an honor to be sitting on this guest chair of the Quantum Guides show for the very first time. And I just want to say one thing. Whether I've listened to episodes of this on the audio side or you've been on any panels and I've heard that theme song of yours, that theme always puts me at ease. I love your intro music, so it was nice to sit through that again as well.
Oh, thank you, Phil. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on the show, and I'm looking forward to our discussion today. You're such an interesting gentleman. You've had such an amazing journey, and I'm really thrilled to bits that you're going to share that with our audience today. I thought that perhaps to get started, we could talk a little bit about that first Reiki session, what things were like before and what happened when you were a client back in September of 2013, and how that ties into some of your sort of metaphysical or psychic experiences.
Yes, the official date of that session, I do not remember offhand. I just roughly remember the time of year as being late summer or early fall. And yes, the context for it is very important as I was going through early awakening stages, a lot of changes in my personal life that would eventually lead into my professional life. And I used to work a very stressful job that was late at night. I'd come home and the family and the pets would be asleep. And sometimes I would jump on YouTube and watch certain types of videos to relax so I could come down from the adrenaline and get some sleep. And by some unknown reason, I ended up looking up Reiki on YouTube and looking at these energy healing videos. And I just said to myself, what is that? This is new and it looks really cool. And I think I was probably falling asleep to some of those demonstrations. And just to add further context, about 5 to 6 months after this, my marriage would come to an end and create a whole bunch of new openings, opportunities, and changes in my life. So, yeah, I was a little stressed out when I first discovered this. And like any new modality, any new person discovers on their journey, you look up to see if anybody is local to you, which is just what I did. And I found one who ran a clinic in my city. Well, they didn't run a clinic, they were operating out of one. And there was a lot of deliberation, a lot of skepticism on my end, and I wasn't sure if I really wanted to go through with this or not. Up until the time when I went and parked my car at the clinic, I just shook my head and I said, what am I even doing here? However, this is the launch point of my journey and would be a forever life-changing experience, as this is what I truly learned about the energetic body, the chakras, how the chakras need to be unblocked, cleaned out, if you will, for the flow of energy in and out of your system. And I'll say this, the tightest chakra in that session was my throat. And right away, the practitioner said, that's unspoken words. And that's exactly where I was at that point in time. And I was totally blown away that she came up with that assessment in the moment. I was like, how did you do that? Like, how do you know? And it's because she was working the energy fields. And in the days and weeks after that session, I've said this before and I'll say it again, I felt like I had maybe some form of an exorcism. I felt like I had been reborn. I felt so much more clear. Things to me were a lot more lighthearted and even funny at times, and a lot of guilt, past grudges, disappointments, a lot of them were gone. It's like they just um, flowed away, and it was like I was a brand new person. And just before you jump in, Karen, because I know we'll get into this more in depth, in the coming weeks and months, I started having psychic premonitions in my dreams that would scare the bejesus out of me at that point in time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. I know that sometimes once our metaphysical experience start, it can be a little unsettling for sure, until we get our bearings. Phil, I just want to take a minute to say hello to Lee, or is it Leah? And Amy is here also. She's a big fan
Right
of
on.
yours.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say hi and give them a shout out. And yeah, so you had that initial healing. You realized how that things that we can't necessarily see, alternative ways of healing, are very, very valid. That happened to me too. I've always had trouble with my throat chakra
Mm,
because of choking back, speaking my truth,
right.
and it takes a lot of courage, to be able to speak your truth, especially when it's different than what the mainstream is speaking. I'm wondering if you could explain a little bit about how you were able to reconnect with your psychic premonitions in your dreams in your 30s, because you actually, as I understand it, had them when you were a child, but I'm guessing you didn't recognize what was going on when you were a child. Is that right?
Yeah, not completely. What I can say about that is this. I've probably had several as a child that are already gone and forgotten. There
Mm-hmm.
is one that sticks out to me all these years later, and I was either 7 or 8 when it happened. And of course, like most children do, I did not tell anybody because I was spooked and I did not know what to think. My brother and I, growing up, were big professional wrestling fans, and it was a big deal for us back in the day to go to the grocery store or the pharmacy or wherever and pick up one of their magazines monthly. And I had this dream where I believe it was November, December, January. I saw the 3 magazine covers consecutively with the exact wrestlers on the cover who would end up being on the cover in those
Mm-hmm.
respective 3 months. They didn't look exactly the same as they did on the magazine covers themselves, but it was like frighteningly close. And I can't explain why it happened, why I saw that as an example. Um, but at some point, that seemed to shut down with me over the years, and probably with some of my partying in my late teenage and early adult years likely had something to do with that, like most males do on their journey at that age. However, when I had the Reiki session done, I was also at that point in time working a very physical job, and I was really making improvements to what I was eating at the time. So I think my
Mhm.
channel just became more clear than normal. And I feel
Mhm.
like since the chakras opened up from that session and that I was about to face some personal turmoil in my life, I think that's when spirit and my guides stepped in and started giving me these messages through the dreams as to say, if you want to reach your soul's top potential, you're going to have to avoid this and you're going to have to go here. So I think they were just signposts. Like there was one,
Mhm.
I was seeing one of the exact same person. And sometimes I would see this person in the physical and they'd be wearing like the same colored outfit in the dream. And it wasn't somebody I knew particularly well, but I think they were a signpost to get me to go into a certain direction, which
Mhm.
eventually would lead me into a direction of going back to school in my 30s. And that would give me the tools to eventually down the road start the Unexplained Incorporated podcast. So there's a couple of examples there. And at that point in time as well, I came across a book by Larry Dossey. I don't remember the name of the book. Premonitions is in the title, but reading that book was a big help to me. And the same Reiki practitioner I visited at the clinic, she felt comfortable enough to start hosting and doing service for me from her home instead of the clinic because she
Mhm.
was just trying to vet people out. So she taught me a lot of things, got me into mindful meditation, and she was the first person who ever told me about guides because I started to have also in my waking life these strange signposts, if you will, and these tingling sensations in my hand and in my crown
Mhm.
when I was around certain areas or certain people. And it got to the point where I couldn't ignore it. And I remember her telling me one day, just going, "Oh, that's just your guides." And at that point in time, this is like early 2014, I'm like, what in the hell are you talking about? Like, what are
Mhm.
guides? Like, I've never heard this before. So the layers just seem to pile on top of one another. And I think that's when it started, when my channel became more clear and I was able to understand and recognize these patterns and premonitions in my dreams. That's how spirit chose to do it.
Mhm. Mhm. Very interesting. Leah has a question here. So, did you create those magazine covers before you saw them? Well, obviously, you weren't the editor or
No.
the person who designed them. Maybe the way they looked a little different was because they hadn't actually been formed yet, but you knew what the subject matter was going to be. What's your
Yeah.
take on how you were able to know ahead of time?
Pretty much just what you said is that, and I've noticed this too, and whether it's a dream or a non physical journey, you will see things at times that will manifest into your waking 3D life, but they won't quite look the same. They will
Mhm.
just look different. And I think Karen, yourself, and anybody else who listens to this will likely agree or mostly be in agreement that spirit is obviously formless, timeless, endless, and certain forms of spirit can form and manipulate energy. And I believe
Mhm.
that's how we get paranormal activity, like the moving of objects, the switching on and off of lights, or sometimes even apparitions. And I think the ones who are able to come through as apparitions, they just might have more of a mastery of that energy manipulation. And in the dream world, in regards to those magazines, I think it's the same thing. And I think that spirit only has so much of a level or a capacity to do that, transferring from the non-physical to the physical, and that's why the things don't look exactly the same.
Mhm. Mhm. I would agree with you. I myself have well, I would say one of my strongest paranormal suits is premonition. I can see things before they happen.
Mm,
Unfortunately, I know when people are going to die and you can't really say anything to them.
yeah.
And so it's a very kind of a heavy thing to carry. But even it's really interesting. Sometimes I'll be watching a show, say on Netflix, and I know every twist in the plot before it happens, and I can
Right.
call out what's going to happen next, even if there's no way that you could know that. Just to sort of play with it. So I know what that's like. And when it happens, it is a bit freaky. It's kind of like deja vu, except you definitely saw it before. Whereas with deja vu, you just get the feeling that you've been there before or you've done that before. But when it's precognition, you do see it coming and then it happens. And it's always, for me, a little bit of a surprise, even though it happens, fairly frequently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, Phil, if you want to talk a little bit about core shamanism. What
Mm-hmm.
exactly is it? How did it take you to even deeper levels of understanding your higher self and your abilities?
Sure. There's a lot I could get into there. Where I would like to start is a little bit of pre-context.
Sure.
Because once I started to meditate more and get more Reiki sessions on a somewhat frequent basis,
Hmm.
obviously, as I'm sure everybody knows, I started to open up. I started to receive more. I started to understand more. I went down some big spiritually based rabbit holes, which eventually would lead to other things and other darker truths on this earth, like most of us know. Um, However, I got a little caught up in the whole, I'll call it a manifestation trap,
Hmm.
thinking that just because I could imagine it and I could will it in, that I was going to get it. And long story short, I had a big plan for how my life was going to go and how it was going to look. And it more or less, that vision completely crumbled on me. And I did not know at the time how to handle it.
Hmm.
And it really shook my faith and questioned things. And in this transitional period, when I was going through a bit of a dark night of the soul, if you will, I found a book by Jeffrey D. Nixa, and it's called The Lost Art of Heart Navigation. And
Hmm.
this discovery was made serendipitously from me in March of 2019, and it opened my psyche to core shamanism. Now, Jeff Nixa was a former law practitioner turned hospice chaplain turned a, into what he coined as an urban shaman. So he
Hmm.
was taught a lot of ancient tribal shamanic practices, and he put it within a setting, within more of a city or an urban setting, even though he held his ceremonies and his practices out in the forest. He was near a city, and that's where his clients came from. He was
Hmm.
able to take those practices and put them into a modern context. And like with the Reiki, there's a chapter near the end of his book where it says, you can find a local practitioner on your own. And I said, this is a great idea. I really need this
Hmm.
right now, because the work it seemed like he was doing was to get people who were lost on their soul path to get back on and help
Hmm.
them be more in more of a state of oneness and gratitude with their own life. So I eventually found a practitioner, ironically, who lived and worked about 20 minutes away from the bookstore where I found the book in the first place. So there's some,
Interesting.
yeah, there's some synchronicity for you there. And I had sessions with her, very powerful, very profound. And that's when I made my first non physical contact, which I'll likely get to later. And she would close down her business during the height of lockdowns, unfortunately, because it's
Hmm.
funny, she was working a hybrid job from home before those were even commonplace, like as her
Hmm.
day job. And then she just decided she wasn't going to do this anymore. However, that led me to the practitioner who I would visit for healing and who would teach and host all of these classes and courses under the guise of core shamanism and Reiki. And
Hmm.
she's the one where I got all my certification from. She lives a lot closer to me, and I've made so many wonderful connections and friends through her classes and other people I've gotten to know through there. So, core shamanism was popularized by the famous anthropologist Michael Harner. Now, depending on who you ask, people love Michael Harner or they really do not love him. Okay. And the two names with bringing core shamanism to the Western world and putting it out through media, books, websites, you can look to, there's several, but the two main ones and the two oldest ones are Michael Harner and Sandra Ingerman. And I have
Mm-hmm.
literature from both of them, and I think they're both wonderful. The arguments against Michael Harner and his practices are for cultural appropriation, which I understand. I don't know if I necessarily agree with it in his case,
Mm-hmm.
because what he did was he took elements from several different tribes all around the world and put them
Mm-hmm.
together so he could share those teachings and healings with everyone. And to me, it was from an altruistic place, although some,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the anthropology field, will be like, no, he stole these from these people. How dare he? And however you align with that, that's your decision, that's your journey. I respect with whatever you say. I look at it in the way that this man opened doors to people, especially here in the Western world, that probably wouldn't have been possible otherwise. That's how I look
Mm-hmm.
at it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just sum this up real quick because I could like go on another hour about this alone. But the basics of core shamanism are you have a shamanic practitioner. Um, that is more of an acceptable term to many than shaman because most of the time, an actual shaman is someone who is in lineage and directly works off the land. Someone
Mm-hmm.
like me who lives in the city, I've learned the
Mm-hmm.
practices. I don't have any lineage, so I'm a shamanic practitioner, and that's how I like to
Mm-hmm.
refer to myself. You have a
Mm-hmm.
practitioner and you have a recipient or a client. The client could be in a state of confusion, a state of not great health, mental or physical, or they need clarity on something. Like the basic reasons why anyone would go see a healer in the first place of any kind. And
Mm-hmm.
there will be a dialogue between the two of them. And then the client will relax, either sitting or lying down, preferably lying down, like on a massage table. And the practitioner will put the client into a trance state by a sonic driver, being a drum, a rattle, or both.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on the nature of the journey, um, this will lead the client into a state of relaxation to where they will get guidance from the non physical in different realms. And there's way more
Mm-hmm.
I could get into with that if you'd like, but I'd like to leave you with that for just the minute.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. Now, as far as the appropriation goes, funny thing is, if you really delve into it and have the time and patience to do sort of an international type of um, research, we find that these core elements are found in many different cultures and throughout time. So they were found, say, in ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, and even in the days of the Greeks and Romans. And interestingly, there has always been, not saying that you do, I don't want to speak for you, but there's even been a whole smattering of psychedelics and other plant medicines in there as well. And so when you boil it all down to its core essence, the basic factors are very similar. And what are they here for? To heal us. When we heal ourselves, our families,
Yeah.
our communities, our countries, our world. And I don't think that this kind of healing should be suppressed because we weren't born into a specific indigenous group that practices it. So I think it's all about your intention, Phil,
Yeah.
and what you're going to use it for. And we have so much to learn. So, depending on how you want to look at it, but if you want to be strict, um, kind of woke thinking, they'd say, oh no, you can't have anything to do with that because you weren't born into that culture. And I don't necessarily agree with that. So, what are your thoughts around what I've just said, Phil?
Yeah, I'm pretty much in agreement with it. There's a couple of things I would like to add based on what you just said,
Sure,
though, is
please do.
yes, at least what Michael Harner's learned. And the reason I took my teacher's courses and offerings is one, she was charging way less than other ones around my area were. And number two, um, one of the places I was originally going to learn from, it was the same instructor that taught the first practitioner I saw who closed her business down.
Yeah.
And they both came from the lineage of Michael Harner. So I mean,
Mhm,
and all the
mhm,
positives and all the benefits that that's brought into my life, I can't speak against it. Now,
mhm,
you talked about there being teachings and traditions from all around the world. A lot of people don't know this, but the word shaman or shamanism is rooted from Siberia. So
interesting.
there are tribes and people of the land in Siberia way back before any of us existed that were doing this. So I mean, if you want to take, like you said, the woke route and say that we're stealing from our Aboriginal friends, well, do a little digging. You'll find out that's likely not the case. And a note
Mhm,
on the psychedelics. I've done a few. I will likely do more. I don't need to do too much more because I'm almost at the point where my connection is quite clear and I don't need to do
mhm,
them excessively. But shamanism does not always equal ayahuasca. Now,
mhm,
you asked me the other week if I knew Frank Castle, and I said, yes, I've gotten to know Frankie very recently. He's been on my
mhm,
show. Ayahuasca is big for him. Totally all
mhm,
for it and good for him. That's
mhm,
not the case for everyone, though.
mhm,
Just because you get invited to a shamanic ceremony or you see a shamanic practitioner, they're not going to give you psychedelics. Like, they're not going to force feed them to you. And some of
mhm,
them may not use them at all and are likely not into them all. So remember, that's always optional. It's just a lot of these ayahuasca retreats in South America and such, they have shamans who administer it. Even here in
mhm.
Canada, there's shamans who administer private ceremonies. But that doesn't mean it's a prerequisite to explore all of this. So I wanted to get those 2 points
Mhm.
out of the way right
No,
away.
I totally agree. So I also know Frank, and he's an ayahuasca shaman. I know
Mm-hmm.
other people, he calls himself a neo shaman.
Yep.
I know other people who do shamanic work with mushrooms and things like that. But I also have
Mm-hmm.
a friend named Adam Gell. I don't know if you know
Mm.
Adam. He's a
Sorry, Karen.
shamanic, huh?
Sorry to interrupt, but he's actually coming on my show in February or March. I've been in communication with him actually.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah.
He's a wonderful man. So
Mm-hmm.
how he does it is he doesn't, as far as I know, administer plant medicines, but he does it through drumming and
Mm-hmm.
through drumming. And you can actually go to his channel and listen to some of his guided meditations. They're lovely, but there's something about the drumming that puts you in an altered state
Yep.
and relaxes you. So I think it's I want you to get into more detail on this, but I
Yep.
think it's the vibrations, how they actually affect the heart, the torus field, the body, but even more than that. So do you want to get a bit into
Oh yeah.
drumming? Because I know you also um, talk about timelines and how you can alter timelines through drumming. When you're all done, I'll tell you a little bit about my timeline jumping experience. But go ahead.
Yes. No, this is great because this will lead into timeline jumping and some of my sound bath experiences, which that's when
Mm-hmm.
things get pretty wild. So, um,
Mm-hmm.
so with the drumming, yes, like whatever you do in terms of whether it's meditation, psychedelics, sound therapy, hypnotherapy, and these are things that I do, but I mean, one modality is going to give you the same effect at the end of the day. And what's that same effect? It's going to shut your ego down and force you to surrender. And it's going to have
Mm-hmm.
you listen and open to open communication from the heart space in accordance with the mind, not one or the other. It's that whole coherence that you hear about, heart mind coherence.
Yes,
Now,
yes.
yeah, psychedelics are very aggressive into this. And if you are carrying shadows and unwanted stuff, like I have in certain ceremonies, it's going to get very uncomfortable for you.
Mm-hmm.
And The uncomfortableness will not last, though, and you will make it out the other side and will likely have a beautiful experience to expand your awareness and consciousness. Sound and drumming are not nearly as aggressive. However, they are
Mm-hmm.
very effective, and it's to put you into that trance-like state to get you out of your head and more into your heart. Um, I'll just lay down the basic foundation here for time because, like I said, I could go off on this, but
It's all good. It's all good.
there are 3 non-physical realms if you're journeying properly or receiving journeying through drumming properly. You could go to there's lower world, middle world, upper world. Middle world is mostly reserved for practitioners and certain modalities. You won't be sent there if you get this as a recipient or a client. Lower world connects to the earth, and I've heard other practitioners say this, link it to the cosmology of a tree. Lower world is the roots, the middle is the trunk, and the branches and the leaves are the upper world. Lower
Mm-hmm.
world takes you deeper into the subconscious, and that's where you could connect with your power animal guides.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're visiting a good practitioner, that is the very first thing they will do for you, and the animals will do the work themselves in the non-physical. Upper world is more about big picture, higher consciousness types of realms and types of journeys. And up there, you will meet spirit guides, angelic figures, ascended masters, and sometimes animal guides as well. But
Mm-hmm.
you're taking the client, and even if you get proficient at drumming, you can do it for yourself as well. You could find a way to shut down and keep a beat and merge with the vibration, which is really cool. But what I'd like to say now, if this is all making sense to you, obviously, I think it
Sure it
is.
is.
Okay, good,
Absolutely.
good. Because some people who are not as in tune with this stuff, Karen, you tend to lose them, and you have to, I hate to say it, but dumb it down a little bit. So I'm glad you're
Yeah.
still on the same page here, because it's a lot to
Yeah.
take in for people who are just starting to understand this stuff, right? So,
True. True.
um, so the it's interesting. My teacher, her very first course offering is shamanic journeying and learning how to journey. And if you don't grasp that concept, you're not going to be able to sign up for the rest of the courses. Like, it is the
Mhm.
ultimate prerequisite, because all the other courses that I've taken that were offered, you need to know how to journey. And I'm just going to run through these really quick. And this will show you that time is just not running in a straight line from beginning
Mhm.
to end, and that there are likely multiple timelines and dimensions at play. So there's journeying. You can do various divination exercises. The biggest one and the one most commonly used for healing is soul retrieval. And if you're
Mhm.
wondering what that is,
Mhm.
and after reading your book, Karen, you know a thing or two about this, is that being exposed to serious trauma, especially in childhood, especially where there's abuse, you will lose a fragment of your soul. And
Mhm.
soul retrieval is about going deep within and to help get that back and realign it and reattach it to one's soul. Very
Mhm.
intense work. It's work in my training that I've seemed to excel in, but it
Mhm.
takes a lot. There's shamanic psychopomp, which is crossing souls over to the other side. Once
Mhm.
again, can be very tiring, intense work. And I've done this ceremony for some people that have already passed but needed help crossing, and it is very profound, vivid, and emotional.
Mhm.
And like, I could almost do a whole other podcast on that offering and some of the things I learned in that course. And actually, I think you and I talked about that on your first Unexplained appearance, because I retook that course and then had all these visions, but that's another story for another day. um, and one of my favorites, this one I ended up retaking at the end of December, is Shamanic Dream Time. So
Mhm.
you know how I said we talked about premonitions and dreams. Well, what about those dreams that you've had that you don't forget, or the ones you didn't need to write a dream journal down for, and they affected you positively or negatively? Well, with a practitioner, you can do certain journeys into your dreams to provide further understanding. And it's really funny on that note is that when I was a couple of weeks before retaking that course, I was like, I haven't been dreaming much lately. What am I going to work on? Because you need dreams to bring into this course to work with. And then within less than a week in mid-December, I had 2 crazy vivid dreams that I could work with and that I got further insight on. It was almost like spirit was like, oh yeah, this is coming up. Here you go. Here's some more breadcrumbs for you. And there's also this one isn't for the faint of heart. You won't get hurt, but there's a lot to it. There's a shamanic dismemberment ceremony. And what that is you guide the recipient or the client into the non-physical, and they have a power animal come in to dismember their energetic body. None of this hurts in the physical, but you get taken apart, and then with new energy, you call in a new power animal, and they will put you back together and stitch you back limb by limb. And you basically wake up with new energy. I've done about 3, because you should only do like 1 or 2 of those a year. And they've all had a very profound effect on me. And to close that out, I just want to say that whenever you're doing these things like psychopomp, soul retrieval, dream work, the practitioner always does a drum journey for themselves, and they merge with protective guides. My guides, they've evolved in the last 2 to 3 years, which has been really cool. But you always want protection with the practitioner you're working with to call it in for themselves and to you as well. And one more thing I forgot about completely is there was also shamanic extraction, which I like to refer to as Reiki on steroids. And I say that because if you're sheepish about entities or attachments, that's one modality you might want to stay away from. However, if you do know someone who needs help in that area, getting them to a practitioner that can do some extraction work will benefit, but it is really dirty, intense work. I have not come across an attachment yet, but I know it's out there and it's probably lurking, but I have worked with some really intense energies. And I like to say it's the modality that can go to places where not necessarily a Reiki session can. And that's the core gist. Yeah, that's the gist of the shamanic offerings. Yeah, correct.
It sounds to me like a lot of the work you do is under reclamation, reclaiming the whole self, reclaiming the unspoiled self. And I think it's so, so important. Now, I want to go and do a quick 2-minute break, but when I come back, I want to talk about whether or not this healing can be done online. Because like you and I both know that there is no time or distance in the realms that we're able to access. But to help the audience understand a little bit more, can we just hang on a second? I'll be back in 2 minutes and we'll pick it up from there. Thank you so much. Transdimensional, meet the new neighbors. Check out my new book available from Amazon bookstores worldwide and read the stunning details about ET diversity and culture, along with their advanced ways of living and expressing spirituality, which is in no way like anything imagined here on Earth. Transdimensional, Meet the New Neighbors introduces you to many different ET beings, the healing pods, the interior of the big ship, my orientation process, cultural events, and off-world mating practices. When I tucked myself into bed for the night back in 2014, I had no idea that I would be transported to the big ship, meet many different extraterrestrial races of beings, become well acquainted with their culture, and visit numerous interesting worlds. While away, I learned a great deal about the big ship, intergalactic and transdimensional travel, intergalactic planetary research, and the various options for resettlement. My true life adventures continued night after night, and I had never experienced anything like this before. The first few times that I awoke back at home, I convinced myself that it had all been some kind of a fantastic dream. But while away, I was eating, sleeping, learning, and visiting, all the while experiencing what I perceived as days, weeks, and months. I am so happy to present you with my true nonfiction account of my weird little life and the more important messages from beyond our realm that I have been tasked to share with all of you. It is my hope and sincere desire that I will inspire you to acknowledge your own transdimensional abilities and experiences so that together we can become the change we wish to see in our world. Paperback and Kindle editions are now available at all Amazon bookstores. Go to the Amazon website, select the bookstore or Kindle store, and enter Transdimensional Meet the New Neighbors by Karen Holton. The Audible version is coming out soon. And we're back. I just wanted to, let people know about my new book. Okay, so we've talked a bit about shamanic healing. What is core shaman work? What are some of the different techniques that you use? So, say you have somebody who lives on the other side of Canada or lives in the United States or Europe or wherever, and they want to have a shamanic session with you, Phil. Can you answer some of their possible concerns? Like, first of all, is that possible over long distance? Can you do something like that, say on Zoom? The other thing is, if they should run into troubles, are you able to rescue them and come in and help them? And again, that gets back to the physical distance. Do you need to be close to them? What's your what is your advice to people who might be interested in having a session with you, Phil, that people that don't live close by?
Sure. As it stands right now, I am happy to offer distance Reiki and hypnotherapy because those are work I have done privately online at vast distances, and I've seen it work wonders, and
Mm.
time and energy knows no bounds. With the shamanic healing, I'm sure it can be done. I have yet to do a distance shamanic healing myself, but then, like you mentioned earlier, Adam Gell does a lot of drumming online, and I've sat through a couple of those, and they had an
Mm-hmm.
effect on me for sure. So I'm not going to say
Mm-hmm.
that they weren't going to do the job or anything. My own teacher, one of the main reasons I went to her was that with some certain how should I say this, certain procedures in place, she was able to host in-person gatherings during the lockdown. And
Mm-hmm.
she said to me, other practitioners I were looking into were doing online work only and charging a bit more. And she said to me, this work is not meant to be done online.
Mm-hmm.
And she found a way to host small groups physically, safely, and all that. And that's how I got it. So, to answer your question, it can be done online. Will it be as effective as in person? Some results may vary, but
Mm-hmm.
I recommend for anybody who feels that they're ready to receive the work online and feels that it's a good work for them to go ahead and explore. But nothing will beat being in the same room physically together, person to person. Now, in terms of safety, any good practitioner in what they do will always guide their people back to safety if they sense anything is becoming too much. Um, I hadn't seen that in my shamanic training, but in some of my spiritual hypnosis and my practice, I have my own ways of navigating people around certain tense situations they have to relive. However, if that doesn't work, any practitioner that's worth their weight in gold will safely guide them out of it, and they can do a refund, a reschedule, or take the session into a different direction. So just know you're always safe no matter what comes up.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm really glad that you addressed that issue because I personally know people who have done online regression hypnotherapy. And this one couple I know of that were having this regression hypnotherapy, the wife was having it, and she started to get really uncomfortable and wanted to come out of it, and the practitioner wouldn't let her come out of it.
Yeah.
And even though her husband was saying, stop it right now, bring her back, the practitioner wouldn't. So I'm not saying, I guess I am saying, buyer beware,
Yes.
if you have a bad experience with somebody, well, you shouldn't actually have to have a bad experience with somebody. So what I like about what you've said is you've basically said you go light. So you'll do Reiki online, you'll do the safe stuff online, but you
Hmm.
prefer to do the deeper work in person. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm not trying to scare people out there. I'm just saying that there are some people, not everybody who's a practitioner is mentally balanced. I guess I'm going to say it that way. So it really, for me, is very comforting to hear you say that you want to be cautious, and there's certain kinds of healing that you would do over long distance, and some that, maybe you're willing to try, but you certainly know how to bring them back as soon as things get a bit sticky. And I think that's really important so that people feel safe.
Yeah. And just to add to that real quick, the thing you said about the hypnosis session, major red flag right there.
Yeah, major red
Major.
flag.
And I've said this very recently. I can't remember if I was guesting on another show or if I said it on my own podcast, but one bad practitioner who doesn't practice protection and safety is bad for all of us, because there are
Mhm,
still a high volume, high percentage of people out there who don't believe any of this stuff. And one of them, some of them, I should say, they'll dip their toe in and then they'll hear a bad experience and they'll go, oh, if that's what that's going to do for me, forget it. I'm not going to continue my healing journey because someone they know saw someone who was less than scrupulous or didn't have their
mhm,
best interests in heart. And just a quick story to share before we move on is I can't go too in depth with this because, this confidentiality, privacy, and all that. But I knew someone who was working remotely with a shaman that was farther up in northern Ontario, and her partner was working with the same shaman or shamanic practitioner, and this practitioner was basically playing telephone between the two of them. Things that were supposed to be held in confidence were going back and
mm.
forth to each other, and
Yeah, not
right
very
away,
healthy.
yeah,
Yeah.
but like that's not the way to do it. So I just say
Mm-mm.
that as a cautionary tale to say, do your due diligence and realize what's out there. So like a couple of other high flag or red flags to look for: high prices. I feel you
Mhm,
should be able to charge a reasonable amount and make money doing this, but there's a
mhm,
limit to that. And testimonials. See if there's no testimonials and high prices, or if the testimonials appear to be fake or illegitimate, just go the other way and find someone else.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, I think that's really, really good advice because intuitively, I feel people would be quite safe with you, Phil. And, like I mentioned, Adam Gell, he does the guided meditations with the drumming, and
Mm-hmm.
they're such great experiences. And I'm sure similar could be done through you. I'm curious, we have a few minutes left. Do you want to get a little bit into ego death and breath work? Because I think that's
Yeah.
something we haven't really touched on that I think is really interesting.
Yes, and I think I may tie into some of the sound healing in as well, because it's all kind
Sure.
of interrelated. And some of the other stuff, yeah, we can talk about that another time for sure. And some of it actually got brought up on your appearance on Unexplained Incorporated airing Friday night. So if you want more, you're going to get more. All right. So another element of shamanism I discovered serendipitously was shamanic breath work. And there's an amazing practitioner out of Hamilton, Ontario, named Rebecca Llewellyn. And I started following her on social media the further I got into this journey. And it's funny, I met more and more friends and acquaintances that had worked with her and had said nothing but wonderful things about her.
Mhm,
And then in January of last year, she was co hosting a breathwork and sound bath with another practitioner who
mhm.
happened to be very connected to the cosmos, by the way, which added a whole other neat element into it. And I don't have time to get into the full story today. I've told the story on Forbidden Knowledge News. I've told it on my own podcast. So this specific story, if you wanted in detail, you could find it on one of those forums through my website, obviously, which I'll plug at the end. But I basically went on. So shamanic breath work is a form of breath work with ceremonial elements into it and calling in specific help from the non-physical. And this was blended together with the sound bath and the galactic light codes and whatnot at this event. And I'll just say this, it was the wildest experience I've ever had without being on psychedelics. It was incredible. And the main gist of it was that my lower worlds and upper world guides in the shamanic realms elevated after this ceremony. And I think it was because I elevated a certain level of consciousness from that ceremony. And I received all sorts of incredible messages, and I felt more grounded, I think, than I ever have in my entire life after that ceremony. Anyway, fast forward ahead a little bit. I go to a couple of more ceremonies that Rebecca was holding on her own, and they still had a very profound effect on me. And eventually she would come on the podcast as a guest in September, and she might be coming back on again in the spring, but I'll get to that another time. Anyway, January 3rd, I felt like I really needed to go to a ceremony she was holding again just after the holidays. And this time, the connection was so quick. Like, she was going through her opening prayer and affirmation of the ceremony and guiding us to connect to our heart space. And as soon as I closed my eyes for that, I got a message from my guides, and like I almost start crying. Like right away, the connection happened that quick. And we opened our eyes, and she's doing her introduction, and I have to like stare at the ceiling, because like if I make eye contact with her during this introduction, like I'm probably just going to have a breakdown, right? Because I knew something very powerful was coming. And without getting too personal, like I've been doing a lot of shadow work and a lot of inner child healing the last like year or two, and it's really accelerated. And I got messages and inklings that this is just about, not at the ending, but the major heat of it, the major part of it's about to come to an end. And I came out of that session completely reprioritizing what's important in my life, what isn't, what direction do I want to take things, and I don't know, just how I can be of better service. And the shocking realization that my inner child's been driving the inner vessel way too long, and I'm trying to work past some of the shame and embarrassment about that. And I just have to realize this is the evolution of my soul's journey, and that there's nothing I can do. But during these breathwork ceremonies, once you tap in, and breath is another way to shut down the ego and surrender to spirit, you're going to get what you need to get from spirit. Sometimes you may get blackness and just connect with your breath. Other times you may see deceased loved ones, angels, star beings, whatever. Like it's good to go in with a written intention, but you're going to see what you need to see. And another thing that's interesting is Rebecca has like a membership club where she does this breath work online through Zoom. So apparently, even though I've never done it that way, it can be done online as well. And it's another thing where you're always in a safe, protected space, so you have nothing to worry about, even if it may get intense at times.
Wow. Wow. It sounds wonderful. You know, we're not going to have time to get into everything on our little itinerary, but you
Yeah.
know what, Bill? I would love to have you back in about a month if you feel like coming back on the show, and we can get a little bit more in depth into things. You can give us some examples of experiences. I know that you hold confidentiality at a very high priority, so we don't expect you to tell us who you worked with or anything,
Yeah.
but it would be really, really lovely to have you back and get more into this. What I really love about you, Phil, is your sincerity really comes to the fore, and an absence of ego. You know, there have been healers and, you know, different kinds of people on my show, and some of them I have a hard time with. You don't know until someone actually comes on the show.
Yeah.
And then you find out they're very ego driven and they think they're the cat's meow. And those people always make me a little bit nervous, you know.
Yeah.
But I really sense your sincerity. I really want to highly recommend you to the audience. If anybody even if you just want to start off with some Reiki, when I say just Reiki, it's not just Reiki. Reiki is extremely powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, we can get into more about that on another show. It's extremely powerful. It bypasses time and space. It's what I call no harm energy healing. So there
Mm.
are several different modalities where it's impossible for you to be harmed in any way or
Yeah.
traumatized. Reiki is one of those, and I love it very, very much. But I'm wondering, Phil, please feel free to continue with anything you want the audience to know that perhaps I didn't ask you, that you may not have had time to cover on the show today. And then I want you to tell people about your podcast, because your podcast is amazing. And again, all the people that you have on your podcast, they are the real deal. You can really tell that they're genuine and they care about humanity, and they're doing the work themselves, which is, I think, really important before we start, sharing it with other people. But I'm wondering if you just want to talk a little bit about anything we didn't really have time to cover yet. And again, please talk about your podcast. Let people know
Yeah.
what you offer when you do your shows so that they can come and connect with you.
Sure. I'll just end on this. Like, we didn't really get a chance for timing to get into the sound healing. I'll just say this. Um, there's a lot of stories the next time we connect I could pick up on from here, but I had a friend who was doing sound bowl healing and gong healing at a local yoga studio that I went to in September of 2023. And
Mhm,
I went in with the intention, I'd been to a couple of sound baths before, but I was like, what if I treat this like an upper world journey to the shamanic realm? And
mhm,
that's what I did. And then I got answers to questions that blew my mind, like loose ends that spirit hadn't told me until that point in time. And I just went, oh, now this is something to be taken seriously. And it's kind of grown from there. That's all I'll say about that for now. The
mhm,
podcast, yeah, Unexplained Incorporated. If you're into spiritual healing, if you're a paranormal investigator, you study cryptids, UFOs, you're an ET experiencer or contactee like Karen or anybody else, get a hold of me. I'd love to hear your story. One saving grace I have had within the last year is I started doing solo monologue episodes, and they're broken down like this. One is the astral report. I do astral projection to past unexplained events like UFO crashes. This
mhm,
is for entertainment purposes only. They're shorter episodes. They're very raw. I record some of them into my phone, and we just see what I come up with in accordance to the reports that have come out about these. I have The Great Escape, which is like my self help episodes, if you will. And it started out as one organic, separate thing. Now it's turned into a novel, an audio novel with chapters. And I'm not telling you how to live your journey. I'm sharing what's going on in my journey and what's been going on, and that you can share it with me. And if it aligns, great. If it doesn't, that's great too. Um, the most recent chapter of that aired on January 3rd, oddly enough, the night of my breathwork ceremony. And the next one will be probably at the end of April. And there is, oh boy, yes, there's my alter ego, Phantom Phil Fortune, the dark side of me, my shadow, who does shadow sermons. The second shadow sermons aired this past Friday, and that is kind of a light-hearted comedic way to get people into truther and conspiracy material, because sometimes
mhm,
you could jump in full in the deep end and you don't know what's going on or what's being talked about. And this is a
mhm.
slightly humorous way of doing it and introducing people to what we're up against, through a dark alter ego as well. And if you want,
Wonderful.
Yeah, and real quick, if you want to book online hypnotherapy or Reiki with me, lightthewayback.home.com. For Light the Way Back Home Healing, you could do it through my website, or there's a link to my booking page on Lavender Lane where I can do online work there as well. And connect with me at unexplainedinc.com. It'll take you to all my socials and every episode the podcast has ever done. Video episodes are available at Unexplained Incorporated on Rumble.
Wonderful. Now, all the links are going to be in the description below. Now, for those of you that are of the audience that are listening on an audio platform, can you just say again what the websites are and where they can find you in spoken word? Because it helps it to sort of, stay in their minds a little bit better. Do you want to do that? Take a minute to do that now, Phil?
Yep. Unexplained Inc., allword.com. There's a hosting player on the site, which will take you to every single episode for the audio listeners. Audio feeds also available on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. The video episodes are on rumble.com. Unexplained Incorporated. There's an audio and video feed for each episode now. And once again, lightthewayback.home.com is my healing page, and you can reach out to me there directly, or if you go to the link section of that website, Lavender Lane, their link is in there as well, and you can book directly through there to work online with me there as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the show, Phil. I can't wait for you to come back. And I want everybody to check out Phil's podcast Friday night. Just in 2 more days, I'm going to be featured on Phil's podcast. You get to hear more about my extraterrestrial journey. Phil does a wonderful job of asking me good kind of questions, drawing out the deeper elements of my experience. So that's coming up too. So I want to thank you again, Phil, for coming on the Quantum Guide Show. I want to thank all the listeners and viewers, whether you're here for the live, whether you're watching the replay, or whether you're listening on audio. I very much appreciate each and every one of you. I'm wishing you the best week ever. Tune in Sunday to the Aliens and Angels podcast. If you want to hear me read directly from my book to get an idea, we're going to start chapter 3. We're going to get into the intergalactic resettlement program on Sunday. So take care, everybody, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye for now. Thank you for joining me for the Quantum Guide Show. Become the change that you wish to see in the world. Subscribe to my YouTube and other channels at Karen Holton TV. Click the like button, leave me a comment, and share this podcast with your friends. Read about my true life ET contact in my book called Transdimensional: Meet the New Neighbors, which is now available in Amazon bookstores worldwide. Check out my website at www.KarenHoltonHealthCoach.com to see my free resources and amazing products and services. All the links will be in the description below. As part of the Forbidden Knowledge Network, you will find the Quantum Guide Show with Karen Holton and also the Aliens and Angels podcast on all audio platforms. Until next time, keep up the good work.